Hello, Vault Hunters. Dead Spikes here, and we are here with another week of updates for Borderlands 4. It is currently October 2nd, and they released their huge patch notes for all the buffs they are doing to Borderlands 4. I'm going to start this video off with a big warning, just so everyone knows what to expect. What they said weeks ago and what they're going to be doing is they're releasing a bunch of buffs for the game to make all the characters better. And then the week after is where they're finally cracking down and fixing a lot of glitches, exploits, and nerfing stuff. So, this is the high point right now, so be happy and enjoy this. But next week, we're going to see a lot of probably negative reviews and nerfs. It's what's going to happen. The game needs it. So on. So, for this week of Borderlands news, we got the largest patch notes I've probably ever saw for Borderlands, and maybe next week will be bigger with all the nerfs. I don't know. But with that being said, what I'm going to be doing is a little bit backwards to what I'm used to doing. I'm used to covering the patch notes and then doing all the weekly stuff, like the Maurice Black Market and so on. But this week, I'm just going to get that out of the way, all of the weekly changes, and then we're going to go over the very long buff patch notes. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First, we are going to be starting with where is Maurice's Black Market. For this week, it is located in Fade Fields on the bottom left of the right side. I don't really know how else to describe this, but you're in Fade Fields. On the right side, there's a little spot here, right here. Hopefully you can tell where that is. It's just to the left of Fortress Andromeda. I would teleport to Someday Rise and run down here. That's what I did. This is what the area kind of looks like. And then there's a building right up here. Inside this building, you will find Maurice's Black Market. Go ahead and open it up, and everyone will have different legendaries. Let me know if you had anything cool in yours. Ooh, I got a Rapid Slippy right there. Cool. I'm actually going to buy a Rapid Slippy. I like that. Bang! Let me know if you guys found anything cool in yours. So, that is where Maurice's Black Market is. Next is going to be the mission. The weekly mission we have is Means of Ascent. And this mission was very easy. There's no bosses in it. It's just literally a little bit of ad clear, not even a whole lot. It's mostly running around. But you get an AR from it, and I'm not sure which one it is yet. So, let's go open up our rewards and see what we got. We got the Star Helix. I haven't had this drop yet. TDR license is probably unfortunate. Of course, you probably want Jacobs on it like everything else. But, yeah, Star Helix. This is one of my favorite Borderlands 3 guns, but I heard it wasn't very stellar in Borderlands 4, unfortunately. But there you go. If you want to farm the Star Helix, do the weekly mission right now. You have a guaranteed drop every time you clear it. Next is Moxie's Big Encore Machine of the week, and it is the best one we've had so far with my most farmed boss, and it's not even close, Driller Hole. So, on the left side of Carcadia Valley, on the bottom here, we have Driller Hole. Driller Hole drops two of the best weapons in the game, hands down. He drops the GMR, and he drops the Katagawa's Revenge. If you get a Katagawa's with Revenge with Jacobs, it is going absolutely crazy right now and one of the best boss DPS weapons in the game. So if you wanted to spend your Iridium at any point, now's the time. Go farm Driller Hole, pump some Iridium into him, and you'll get some really good legendaries. Get a GMR with Jacobs, get a Katagawa Revenge with Jacobs, and I promise you'll be impressed by both. The last drop is Fuse. I really don't like Fuse. Maybe I don't know how to use it correctly, but when I've thrown it and tried to use it, it has not been very successful for me. Now, since we've covered all the weekly stuff, let's get into the update. If you want to read through this by yourself instead of hearing my boring, melancholy voice, I will have it in the description of this video down below. If you enjoy my content, it would mean a lot to me if you'd consider subscribing. Especially if this isn't the first video you've made of mine. I plan on covering Borderlands 4 for a very, very long time. I don't see any game in the foreseeable future that I'm going to switch to. I just want to make Borderlands 4 content, and I'm going to keep doing that for a long time. So if you like Borderlands 4 and you want to follow the game, I would really ask that you consider subscribing to this channel. It means a lot to me. It doesn't cost anything. But anything, let's keep going. So, we're on our Borderlands 4 update notes, October 2nd, 2025. Literally, straight up, the only thing they do is character improvements. Character adjustment balance, I guess is what they call it. And Harlow got almost nothing. Before I get into this, one thing I do want to say that's kind of funny is if they just put 10% buff to all skills in the game, I almost feel like it would do the same thing as me going through this very long patch note. But anyways, let's get into it. So, Harlow's buff. Action skills, 0 point. Stasis slam damage increased by 30%. Stasis immune damage increased by 15%. Now, I do think this was needed. I used slam a little bit, and it wasn't that insane, so maybe this brings it up to par with some of her other skills. Rafa. Action skill, Apophis Lance, increased damage by 10%. Capstones, People Person. Project Raju damage now scales by 12% per second, up to 10%. I'm going to let you know, I'm going to butcher a lot of these words. If you want to tell me every single one in the comments, that is fine. But I'm just warning you, I'm terrible at reading comprehension and pronunciation, especially when it's words I haven't saw before. All right. Project Basilisk damage increased by 15%. Project Basilisk hazard damage increased by 25%. Project Gorgon damage increased by 17%. Passives, People Person. El Catherine. Critical hit damage increased to 8% from 7% per point. Bonus shock damage increased to 8% from 7% per point. Perma Last. Double damage chance increased to 6% from 5% per point. Action skill, Arc Knives. Here's what's kind of funny to me is I was just told the other day that Arc Knives are going insane and people are getting like one-shot boss kills. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe there's some gimmick to it that I don't know about. I personally haven't watched it. But that's the only thing I've heard about Arc Knives. And to hear that and then connect it to this buff I'm about to read is kind of funny to me. Action skills, Arc Knives. Melee attack damage increased by 12%. Dash damage increased by 5%. Probably good. I don't know. I wish I would have tried it. I just haven't got around to it yet. It was one I was very thrilled to try before the game came out. I just haven't got around to it yet. Passives, this year's gimmick. Handshake deal. Melee damage increased to 9% from 7% per point. To the last. Skill damage increased to 8% from 6% per point. Alperagus. Splash damage increased to 9% from 7% per point. Liquidation. Damage increased by 50%. Collaborative Ignition. Bonus damage increased to 8% from 6% per point. Duration of Synergia increased to 14 seconds from 12 seconds. Melee damage increased to 4% from 3% per point. And Puji action skill duration increased to 7% from 6% per point. So it kind of, to me, reads that Arc Knives was lacking compared to his other skills, and that looks like it got the majority of his buffs for Rafa. But you can see, I mean, it got 10 times more buffs than Harlow. So apparently Harlow's a lot stronger than I know. Vex. Action skills, Incarnate. Phase explosion damage increased by 16.6%. How do they just get numbers like that? Like, I'm sorry, I know this is a lot to already read, but how do you just pull 16.6%? Like, aren't you typing the number in and you could just be 17% or 16%? Or maybe not. Maybe it's an actual value and they just like went from 2,500 to, I don't know, 3,200 or something crazy like that and ended up being 16.6%. I don't know. That's just such a strange number for me. And why not just lie about it? I don't know. It just looks weird. 16.6. Whatever. Eldritch Blast damage increased by 9.5%. Augments Vescalation. Energy Vampire damage increased by 25%. Capstones Vescalation. Heart Piercer damage increased by 22%. Desecration Hazard damage increased by 50%. Desecration Airborne Burst damage increased by 48%. Geist Wave damage increased by 41%. Passives Vescalation. Radiant Attunement now deals 7% splash damage, up from 6% per point. Deadlight Hazard damage increased by 100%. That's crazy. I don't really see hazard damage doing a whole lot. I don't even pay attention to it. Like I've never even probably saw it to be honest. That's how little I pay attention to hazard damage. I know what it is. It's like the pools that's supposed to leave on the ground from Borderlands 3, but I just haven't really noticed it. But maybe buffs like this will make them a little bit more relevant. AR's Arcana now increases skill damage by 9% from 8% per point. Action skills Phase Familiar, Trouble Health increased by 10%, Trouble Damage increased by 21.9%. Weird number. Augments Here Comes Trouble, Violent Outburst damage increased by 12.5%. Vorpal Fang damage increased by 34%. Capstones Here Comes Trouble. Trouble Bubble damage increased by 33%. Passives Here Comes Trouble. Blood is Magic Now increases action skill damage by 8% from 7% per point. Claw and Bang now increases melee damage by 8% from 6% per point. Passives, the Fourth Seal. Spell Inscriptions melee damage increased to 7% from 6% per point. Recurrence now increases melee damage by 0.2% per stack from 0.16% per point. Aura Specs Phase Dagger damage increased by 11.7%. Alright, finally onto our last Vault Hunter, Amon. Action skills, Scourge. Scourge now has had its maximum vengeance increased by 50%, making it able to absorb more damage and deal more damage with Forge Whip consumed. Forge Whip damage has increased by 27%. I haven't tried that skill yet. It doesn't really interest me to take a Titan Shield from Destiny and just absorb damage and deal it back. I guess Athena had that in pre-sequel. Maybe I'll get around to it, but it's just a slower playstyle that's just not interesting to me. I'm sure it could go crazy. Maybe it'll be important in later content or something. Anyways, Augments Vengeance. Blast Chill damage increased by 45%. Molten Rebuke damage increased by 86%. Eternal Winter Massive Forge Wave damage increased by 100%. Another big 100%. Jeez. Stormlance damage increased by 52%. Stormlance Detonation damage increased by 10%. Capstones Vengeance. Glacial Rapture Capstone now has a 60-second cooldown, down from 70 seconds. Glacial Rapture Forge Whip damage increased by 16%. Glacial Rapture Fissure damage increased by 41%. Wrathful damage increased by 46%. Passive Vengeance. Scorched Karos now increases ordnance damage by 6%, up from 5% per point. Battleborn now increases gun damage by 4%, up from 3% per point. Scar Tissue now increases maximum health and rep kit healing by 9%, up from 8% per point. Eternal now increases action skill duration by 5%, up from 4% per point. World Breaker damage increased by 50%. Winter's Kiss now increases damage dealt by 10%, up from 8% per point. Strike the Anvil now deals 50% of the damage dealt, up from 12% per point. Action skills Crucible. Forge Axe damage increased by 12%. Double Edge's Twinned Forge Axe damage increased by 10%. Axe and Stone's action skill cooldown restoration increased to 40% from 33%. Axe and Stone's action skill ordnance restoration increased to 40% from 33%. Why didn't you just put this into the same text? I don't know. Endless War Gun damage taken increased to 20% from 50% per prime stack. Hour of the Hammer Forge Hammer damage increased by 14%. Blade Tempest Forge Sword damage increased by 30%. Blade Tempest Forge Sword detonation damage increased by 4%. Capstone Cybernetics. Snowball damage increased by 38%. Storm Surge impact damage increased by 10%. Storm Surge Forge Storm damage increased by 60%. Con Flangerang Capstone's Fire Trail damage increased by 100%. Passive Cybernetics. Gathering Storm now increases elemental damage by 3% per stack, up from 2%. Executioner now increases critical hit damage by 4%, up from 3%. Destruction Engine now increases forge skill damage by 6%, up from 5% per point. Destruction Engine now increases detonation damage by 8%, up from 6% per point. Tempered Pyre Forge Axe damage increased by 19%. Tempered Ice Forge Hammer damage increased by 18%. Masterwork now increases Forge Drones damage by 10% from 7% per point. Masterwork now increases Forge Drones duration by 8% from 5% per point. Tempered Lightning Forge Sword damage increased by 13%. Lightning Rod Elemental Bolt now deals 40% of the damage dealt, up from 30% per point. Escalation now increases Forge Drones attack speed and movement speed by 5%, up from 3% per point. Honed Point now increases Forge Drones critical hit chance by 5%, up from 4% per point. Heat Exchange now increases Cryo and Incinerary damage by 8%, up from 7% per point. Action Skills Onslaughter. Onslaughter Shield Regeneration increased to 15% per second from 10%. Onslaughter Rocket Punch damage increased by 78%. Okay, that's crazy. I actually use this. Rocket Punch damage increased by 78%. I already, one shot with it at some point, so... Okay, cool. I'll take that. Molten Slam now has a 60-second cooldown from 80 seconds. Molten Slam damage increased by 50%. Bellfrost damage increased by 71%. Fulminating Fist damage increased by 69%. Capstone's Calamity. Horcleave now has a 55-second cooldown from 65 seconds. Horcleave's damage increased by 11%. Horcleave's detonation damage increased by 18%. Molten Royal now has a 70-second cooldown from 80 seconds. Stormcutter now has a 65-second cooldown from 75 seconds. Stormcutter damage increased by 65%. Passives, Calamity. Heavy Plate now increases maximum shield capacity by 7%, up from 6% per point. Wield the Storm now increases status effect damage and status effect duration by 7% from 6% per point. Tritantium Knuckles now increases melee damage by 8%, up from 7% per point. Tritantium Knuckles now increases skill damage by 4%, up from 3% per point. Harbinger now increases melee damage by 2% per stack, up from 1% per point. Mortal Flare damage is increased by 22%. Judgment now increases melee damage by 10%, up from 8% per point. And we made it through. So did 3 of the viewers. But that was a lot of patch notes. Obviously, Amon got way more than everybody else. I don't know if it was quite necessary. I only play melee Amon so far, and I think he's very strong, if not my favorite character to play now. But, hey, that's awesome to see. I surprised Vex got so much, because she's kind of rated the strongest Vault Hunter right now, but maybe we're going to start seeing different builds rather than the traditional bleed and sniper builds. But yeah, that's it. Let me know what you guys think. Are any of these sticking out to you? Do any of these seem like way too big of buffs or anything like that? I don't know. This is the calm before the storm. Next week will be a little bit more negative. So, if you enjoyed this again, please leave a like. Let me know what you think. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. This is Bikes out.